All right, we're good to go.
The new
So
DM.
today, or for this video, I guess more accurately, we'll be reacting to a video by Thunder God. I believe they did a How Powerful Virgil a while back that we reacted to, if I'm not mistaken. Or were you not there for that one, Mangler? Okay, that's funny. I started the video recording and everything, and I was giving the introduction, and I didn't realize I still had you deafened and muted. Were
That's
you?
okay. I was drinking a juice bag,
That's fine.
so I
Were
would have been
you?
making sounds that were not natural to my body.
That's weird. But so were you there for the Thunder God video of the Virgil one or no?
I was there for all of them.
Okay, so yeah, we've gone through this guy before. So today we're gonna be looking at a video he made called Could the DMC Anime Dante from Netflix beat Game Dante from DMC3? I don't really understand why he doesn't specify Netflix because there's two DMC animes, and the answer is one of them does beat DMC3 Dante. Just out
Well,
of
I think the
interest.
reason for that is because the anime Dante of the 2008 anime is the same Dante. It's from the same continuity, just further along in the time. So it
Yes.
would be asking, can a later version of Dante beat an earlier version of Dante? To which the answer will always be yes.
So let us begin. 1.25 speed, seven
Anime
minutes.
premiering on Netflix, it begs the question how this
Mhm.
newer version of Dante really compares to his video game counterpart in terms of strength, which I thought it'd be interesting to compare him to the earliest and closest version, in my opinion, to this anime counterpart, that being DMC3 Dante. This should be pretty clear. The anime for DMC kind of exists as its own continuity, which should be pretty clear if you've watched it. This basically means anime Dante scales to a completely different level of strength than any of the game versions of Dante, and doesn't piggyback off of any of the scaling or feats they
No.
have there. Let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about DMC3 Dante and his speed. For DMC3 Dante's speed, there's the obvious rainstorm feat where him and Virgil are moving so fast the raindrops appear to be just standing still in midair. Mind you, this is a slow down depiction of the two, and the raindrops are standing still for multiple seconds on end. When calced, a lower end interpretation of this feat actually gets Dante to 13.35% the speed of light, or on a higher end interpretation, 35% the speed of light, which is pretty ridiculous, and this is really a low end since this is before Dante awakens his demon powers, as along with awakening Dante's devil trigger, it makes him holistically stronger, as it's just
So I'm gonna pause it at 1 minute in. I think that's the first time I've heard that rank calc feat be calculated at sub rel. Is that a new meta that's been introduced to the community, or is that like unique to this video?
Probably just less lying. Usually, most people who do calculations nowadays on DMC, if they don't come from Versus Battle Wiki, they're just not really dishonest.
Yeah, so I
That's
didn't.
like most things are made like they make a low end calc based on what they think is happening in the picture, taking like a certain amount of the raindrops and then just massively downscale it to make it like hypersonic. It's always been near the speed of light. So I don't know why he's bringing this up when talking about speed. He should be talking about the demon world.
Okay, okay. No, I was curious because, well, I mean, because technically you start with low balls and then go up, presumably. But yeah, no, I was just curious on that one because I've never heard that feat ever get sub rel.
stated and I mean shown that he lost to Virgil in this initial confrontation to go on to match Virgil in their following fight, with this also just being outright stated. As if this weren't crazy enough, Dante would actually show better feats in DMC3 as he would go on to fight an enemy called the Damned Rook, which are netherworld crafted chess pieces that emit lasers very reminiscent to that of light attacks. Mind you, the DMC3 guidebook goes out of its way to call these beams of light lasers, so we can say they are lasers and they are consistent with how light moves. This feat in specific on a lower end has actually been calced to 1.2 times the speed of light, or FTL, and on a higher end has been calced to 6.3 times the speed of light, FTL again. So Dante is
Okay, so while I do agree using the rooks for scaling and their lasers is fine, I do support that position. What's the time frame for that calculation then? Is it just like can because I know you can royal guard it right before it hits you, so I'm not too sure what the what's the time frame there.
Generally, it's just a short time frame of probably like a second or half a second.
I'll say like what are we calking here? Because there's no cutscene where the rook ever appears to fire the laser at Dante, so it's all gameplay from there. Don't get me wrong, again, I do support the idea of using it for light speed scaling, but I just don't know what time frame you would even use for a feat like that.
casually faster than light, excluding his Devil Trigger, which is a holistic power-up for him, although there's no exact multiplier on it. The DMC3 strategy guide, which should be on screen right now, notes that in Devil Trigger mode, Dante attacks with greater damaging power and moves with much faster speed. This should at the very least be a 2x increase on all of Dante's stats, this being the absolute bare minimum, and in all likelihood it's much higher. Due to on the DMC1 strategy guide, it's noted that Dante's power doubles in the Devil Trigger state, along with his running speed being twice as fast. These aren't upper limits at any stretch for Dante's speed or his Devil Trigger strength increase or
It should be worth noting the DMC1 guidebook sections he's referring to is much more in line talking about gameplay in those particular areas as it explains what the mechanic is. So that's more of a gameplay representation of the ability rather than what it would probably be lore-wise. It is ultimately, I think, one of 2 Devil Trigger multiplier statements we have, though. I think the other one's a DMC2's guidebook. I don't think
it is.
I don't think we have any other multiplier statements beyond that point. So yeah, it's definitely a fair baseline, but it should be worth mentioning that technically this is referring to gameplay a lot more. But it's one of our only numbers, so it's fine.
Dante's strength increase since he progressively gets strong.
It's actually interesting that this is, I think, the first video we've reacted to so far that like presents so many direct on-point scans.
Or even just fighting regularly, but more so giving us
baseline Thunder God typically has scans for the things he claims.
In terms of strength, there is so much to go over that I would honestly.
I know it's shocking. Some people can actually provide evidence for things.
Okay, so I do have to. I'm gonna offer one critique. Why are we getting a bunch of DMC5 cutscenes when DMC3 has plenty of combat cutscenes as well? It's just weird.
Probably has better combat cutscenes than most of the series.
Meta, so to speak, to actually get these.
To be honest, because that's kind of all they focused on during development.
Yeah.
To those universal levels of strength. One avenue could potentially be off Nightmare, which is one of V's familiars during the.
I guess he's just now. You got to talk about. Wait. Have you gotten past the Nightmare point?
No, not yet. So I'm gonna go back a bit, because we were talking over his words. Hang on, I'm going back to 236.
To try and just encapsulate it within a couple of minutes. There are multiple ways or metas, so to speak, to actually get these DMC characters like Dante to those universal levels of strength. One avenue could potentially be off Nightmare, which is one of V's familiars during the events of Devil May Cry 5, who is stated to, if gone unrestricted, to be able to destroy the Demon World. The Demon World
Hang on. Why are we introducing Nightmare as V's familiar and not the boss of DMC1 that it's based on? Okay. That's wild. That's actually wild.
So what I find weird here, you probably noticed this, he brought up Nightmare as an AP feat, which is true, but he does not bring him up as a speed feat. So I'm going to have to explain this again for people, especially for Thunder God. If I have an attack that is fired like a laser that can destroy the entire demon world and its space-time continuum on multiple different dimensions of time, and I can do it in a short frame of time, my attack still needs to be covering the entire distance of that observable universe. And the demon world has multiple statements of being infinite. Yes. So that attack would have to be bare minimum infinite speed, not counting the fact that it's also crossing the distance between multiple space-time continuums in a place that is, by the statements in DMC3, is stated to transcend time. Because I tell you, the demonic energy can go backwards and forwards beyond time. So that attack at the lowest end is like infinite.
To be fair,
at like more accurate estimate, it's immeasurable.
Is it even valid to scale Nightmare here at this point to DMC3 Dante? Because
I've explained this before, but Nightmare isn't ever actually stated to be like a proper sort of servant of Mundus in that regard. The statements given for like his strongest servants are the Angelos. The Angelos are technically the most powerful. People just think he's more powerful because he fights Dante 3 times, but when you go into his lore, you don't actually find any statements to support the position of him being stronger than like Griffin or Phantom or anything like that.
Well, the reason I'm saying this is because doesn't the DMC1 guidebook, and I think Kaizo Shinsho, imply that Nightmare was like a hard fight for DMC1 Dante?
No, it does not imply that at all. A massive misconception by VSB. Because they want to put so much emphasis on Nightmare being something strong, because they want to argue that destroying the demon world is something that like only the strongest demons can do. That's never really stated or even asserted. it's also pointed out that like destroying the demon world is like weaker than what the demon kings can do.
All right.
So
is actually
yeah,
universal in
it's
size, as the
just a
demon
common
world and human
misconception.
world have their own
But I'm just saying this should be a speed feat. This should be a speed feat. We should be bringing this up.
space-time continuums, and time and space flow differently in each world. Another way this could be perceived is Mundus creating an entire universe during the events of DMC1. This not being strictly an illusion because Dante and Mundus actually do land on a planet with a lake full of magma or meteors that are actually real. You can even look at feats by the legendary knight himself, Sparda, who split the universes apart. A feat.
Okay. So look. So I'm on 324. Look, I appreciate I appreciate the consistency of like uni DMC like arguments and stuff. That's fine. But we are not going to get into discussion that Mundus or Sparta would scale the DMC3 Dante in that regard. That is not. I refuse. I don't care if
A better
would.
Okay, so a better argument would just be to explain that like Mundus and his tier wouldn't have dropped tiers, but stop phrasing it like the way that you do.
Also shared by Pluto.
Because the way you do okay, so how I would go about explaining this would be that like Dante obviously has the powers of Sparta that is directly stated multiple times. He is able to fight something using Sparta's power, and Mundus, even though he's not fully revived, openly admits he would have lost to Virgil, and he didn't have enough strength to kill Dante. So you can argue Dante is still Demon King level. You would just argue he's weaker. That's not how he presented that. He made it sound like Dante could do all the things that Sparta could do with Sparta's level of power, and that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, unfortunately, it gets a little weird because, like, there is. I don't know if this meta still exists, but there was, like, a DMC3 Dante scaling the Sparta meta because Arkham getting the power of Sparta. But then that ends up becoming a really weird situation as the fight goes on.
Yeah, Sparta's been retconned multiple times. I mean, Dante still belongs to the same tier as the Demon Kings, but, like, he's not, in verse. He's not as strong as Sparta is by the time 3 happens. Not even close.
All right.
He's not even as strong as like the Rebellion Sparta.
Wild. Let's continue.
Capable of splitting the human and demon world asunder or apart in a single blow. There are multiple ways that these characters just get to these ridiculous and absurd levels of strength, and we actually do know that Dante and Virgil, at the very least, were working towards approaching these levels, as it's noted in the Before the Nightmare novel that is canon and a prequel to DMC5, that if Virgil actually wasn't fatigued and wounded from his fight with Dante, would have surely defeated Mundus, who didn't rise because he didn't completely revive. This is to say that compared to DMC anime Dante,
okay, hang on. So I'm at 3.
surely defeated Mundus, who didn't rise because he didn't completely revive. This is to say that compared to DMC anime Dante, who has none of this or any real scaling that puts him even in the same stratosphere in terms of strength as DMC3 Dante, there isn't really too much of a discussion. Even if you don't think DMC3 Dante fully scales to these universal levels, you would just be at a much higher tier compared to his anime counterpart. I also will say I'm
at like
selling
430.
It a little bit because
I'm at 416.
because a lot of these feats just count towards multiple universes or the demon world being infinite in size. Please understand that I gave you like the most Spark Notes of Spark Notes explanation, and that this does get very crazy. Comparing this to the anime version of DMC.
Well, he did mention the demon world being infinite in size at around 430, but I guess that there wasn't enough time for that.
He said he wanted to give the Spark Notes version, and I understand that. I'm just saying that whenever you mention Nightmare, you need to remember that's a speed feat more than it is an AP feat, because destroying the demon world is not impressive. It's never treated as impressive. It's just treated as a threat to Mundus' plans, because he wants to rule something, and it's impossible to rule it if it's destroyed.
Nonsense.
Clear that this version of Dante isn't quite up to par to his video game counterpart. Speed feats like saving everybody in the diner before the truck crashes into it obviously pale in comparison to Dante's rain feat, or even outpacing an RPG missile, which, even using more generous metrics from missiles from our world, is still around Mach 1 in terms of speed. This version of Dante doesn't really have the best tangible feats to really say he'd be above his video game counterpart. This version of Dante is also portrayed as a bit more of a grounded interpretation. This may just be for the sake of the story, but he's just constantly struggling with characters far weaker than himself, or who should be weaker compared to his game counterpart, such as Agni and Rudra, who are just no-diff opponents for Dante in the game, but in the anime he struggles quite a bit with, even with his Devil Trigger state. For those who aren't quite as familiar with the Devil May Cry games, pretty much Dante no-diffs everybody. He no-sells the entirety of the games usually, and they're really just combo simulators, where the whole point is to get the best score. Dante has lost before, but this is really...
Sort of? I'd say that's kind of like half and half.
if you were to
So
actually break it
it's
down,
only true. It's only true. Okay, it's only true if we're just talking about the lesser demons and maybe like 2/3 of the bosses, which might seem like everybody. But the problem is that when every man antagonist can contest you, you're not really like selling.
well, I mean, like, so in
He
DMC
does great,
one,
but he's not doing ideally.
in
I would
DMC
say.
three, he no sells most of them, with the exception of Beowulf for the most
With
part.
the exception of Beowulf, probably Doppelganger, because Doppelganger has his abilities. He doesn't no-sell Arkham, and he doesn't no-sell Virgil. Any of the fights, he fights Virgil. That's like
Yeah,
5
but
boss
so
fights.
I mean, that's still the majority of bosses in that one. In DMC one, the only one you can argue he no sells is maybe Phantom. I think all the other one, and I guess Nightmare too. Well, does Griffin
Yeah,
actually?
because Griffin gets amped to fight him multiple
Yes.
times. Nello Angelo, he openly admits he barely defeats him, even though Nello's massively nerfed. Mundus almost kills him. I think Nightmare is the only one that he really like stomps aside from
Well,
Phantom.
yeah, so Nightmare and Phantom don't really have the statements to support their position. And then in DMC two, there's technically Arius,
Furiataris
Taurus,
forces the Devil Trigger. Arius fights him twice.
and
Argosax contests
Argosax.
him.
The other
Yeah,
bosses he
so
basically no sells, and then in four,
so
the Savior, character.
the Savior, Agnes, Nero, technically.
No.
Um, I'm just pointing out that like a no sell for me would be like if you only had like one loss. If you're getting contested like every other fight with the bosses, that's not a no sell.
I
That's
mean
like
that.
medium difficulty at that point.
I mean that's fair. I think
I
DMC
know what he's
five.
trying to say. I get it. He's one of the top dogs. That's fair game. If
Well,
you threw like most ordinary opponents at him in the verse, he probably killed them all.
what
But
I'm
he's
gonna
fighting the
say
best of the best.
is that ironically enough, I think it's DMC five, which is the only time he ever basically no sells everyone but the final boss in DMC five. Is I think the only time the other bosses don't really do shit to him.
Yeah, the DMC5 is really the only time, and we're not even counting the novels because he also gets contested multiple times in the novels.
No, don't worry. We'll talk about that.
Only
All right, let's move on.
through
Yeah,
Virgil and maybe
just
some
a
minor
small
exceptions if you
correction.
want to get
Oh wait, hold on. Let me see what he said.
best score. Dante has lost before, but this is really only through Virgil and maybe some minor exceptions if you want to get into the nitty gritty.
Really, only to Virgil and some minor exceptions.
We just gave you like 2 or 3 exceptions from every game in addition to Virgil. So it's not just Virgil. It's like every Demon King.
And I would say, I mean, like if you also want to argue that Dante didn't technically lose those fights, he didn't win them either for the most part.
That's wild because he gets stalemated by like most of them. Some of them almost kill him multiple times. Granted, he still succeeds at achieving victory, but it's not because he went up and was like, "Hey, get out of my way!" Flick, and then just won. That's not what happened.
And to an extent, I think it is fine to have a more grounded interpretation of Dante because it is a little difficult to have stakes if Dante is just washing every single person he comes across in the actual.
Can I also pause it again? Because he's talking about having stakes with Dante washing everyone. In the original DMC anime, Dante literally gets crucified and loses.
and then he comes back and he's like, "All right, I'm stronger now." And then he gets stalemated immediately and has to pop DT for just a second in order to win the stalemate.
Like they can just have Demon King level demons appear. There's more than one of them. It's just that only 2 of them like could actually like contest ownership of the demon.
I also find that funny that he mentions this about Anime Dante, whereas if you go and watch most of the fights, whenever Anime Dante fights these people, while he is getting contested by a few of them, he usually wins every fight. And I would argue some of them he doesn't even really like take damage from. He no damages more than a few of them, especially on the second rounds with them. So by around the same amount of logic, we would argue he's no diffing them, even though some of them are fighting him back.
I think the only like main demon after the Agni and Rudra that actually gives him trouble is just the White Rabbit. But
it's just the White Rabbit, but that's when he's like amped up at the very end of the series.
Let's continue.
Netflix show, but even from, let's say, an Arsenal perspective, Dante isn't coming in too hot either. He doesn't have Ebony or Ivory, which I do think will change since there is a bit of an ongoing gag with him breaking every gun he uses. More importantly, though, Dante doesn't gain any devil arms off of the demons he defeats. Basically, devil arms are when the demons Dante defeats turn into weapons for Dante to use. There's none of this in the Netflix series. Dante's mainly limited to the Rebellion, which doesn't have too many distinct abilities, if any, in the Netflix series. There's like one scene where it absorbs the energy or impact from a missile shot at a school bus, as you see like the blast funnel into the actual blade. So there's just all these layers to where the DMC anime Dante is far more grounded for the sake of the plot that is written. Whether or not you enjoy that, you agree with that, or you want to see that, that's up to you. But the point of this video is that Dante in the anime should never really be compared to his video game counterpart. It's just never going to be close. Even with more seasons and time for this Dante to develop, there's just so many more hacks I could have gone into, like his worst regeneration, his worst ability in battle. Dante's just an absolute unit in terms of combat. There's all these layers to where it's just never really going to be close. So that's the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you want to see more DMC content,
I agree with that. I just think it's I just think there's really no point to talking about what is it the idea of like anime Dante being grounded, because I would argue, as far as him being grounded, that's not even necessarily true, because we haven't seen all that he has to offer, and some of his best speed feats are things that he does very casually at the beginning of the series before he unlocks like any of his powers. We have no reason to believe it's grounded. Like we just don't have a lot of lore
It's really
at this point.
to how Adi, I think Addy, how I don't know how to pronounce his name. How the director wants to proceed with that.
Handle season.
What?
Yeah, how they're going to handle season 2 and 3 and adding all that stuff. Like we don't know how it's going to be portrayed at this point. I'm just pointing out that like I understand that the lore in DMC is like more supernatural, balls to the walls nonsense. But like even in the beginning of the series, they make it a point that like Sparda in the anime, in Netflix anime, is able to seal off the entire demon world and create a barrier between two universes. So they already have uni feats in the anime.
It's just done differently because I think it's technology in the show
No,
versus.
no. So it's done with the power of the Sparta sword.
Well, no,
They just quantify it using technology in the human world in order to understand it. But
Okay.
Sparta, when he actually performed the feat, he used his own power.
Okay, because I remember it being talked about like the sword Sparta was some sort of technology or like advanced technology.
That's how they're interpreting it, because it's something the Sparta can do. But the issue is that you'd still need to produce that kind of energy to seal off a universe regardless.
Yeah, I was just gonna point out that like if DMC gets in the uni stuff for the Netflix anime, there's a good chance it'll revolve more around items and like like those pieces giving that power rather
I,
than they themselves.
I understand, but I wouldn't even consider that grounded at this point, because it kind of gets into a forerunner situation where what is the level of technology you can produce before we stop saying you're a grounded vert? It's like, hey guys, I'm not flicking my finger.
Yeah, no, don't worry, I'm still here. But all right. So
No, it's not.
This was requested, so we watched it. It was overall a fine video, no real complaints, good editing across the board. Just I don't understand why we didn't have more DMC3 scenes or gameplay instead of all those DMC5 sections. I'm assuming it was just used as stock B footage. And yeah, no, I mean, good video overall. All right, and thank you guys for your time as always, and have a nice day.